believe in the ripple effect.
What's up, everybody? What a great episode I have for you today. I am so grateful for the pleasure and the privilege of having today's guest. He was on the Rogan podcast on episode 1768, and I have referred to that podcast as one of the most important JRE episodes ever. And I don't say that lightly, but never has a guest been on JRE and went into the detail that my guest went into and really emphasized and explained and helped us understand the power of big tech and specifically Google. Because many of us don't understand the extent of manipulation, the extent of surveillance that we're all dealing with every single day. And that's why, like I said, I am truly honored to be able to also share his message and get this information out there, because I don't believe anyone out there understands how it's happening, how the manipulation, the social engineering is happening any better than my guest today, Dr. Robert Epstein. And because I truly believe the information that he brings to this podcast is so important and very much worth sharing, please, I don't say this much, but please, if you have never shared one of my podcasts on your social media platforms, on Facebook, Twitter, or if you've never text messaged one of my episodes to a family member or friend, make this one your first, because I can't emphasize enough that we are truly being manipulated, listened to, and spied on by big tech and Google to an extent that most people can't even imagine. So please share this episode, share episode 1768 of JRE, and help get this information and very important research out there. And because this information is so important, let's see if we can get through this intro quickly. As you know, this is a Value for Value show. If you get some value out of these conversations, please consider giving some value back. Of course, if you're not in a good financial situation, don't worry about it. Share, review, tell people about the show. Like I mentioned, that goes a long way and can help fight against the algorithms that are suppressing podcasts like mine and researchers like my guest. But if you can, financially support the show. And please, don't be a cheap ass. If you can, and you're in a good financial situation, please consider becoming a Patreon, supporting us monthly, sending a one-time donation using PayPal. You can also send crypto as a donation, and you can find those wallet addresses on my website and links to all the ways of supporting the show. We also have a merch store that has hats, t-shirts, tank tops, so many different things. So please consider checking out the merch store. That's all I ask. Check out the merch store. Even if you don't want to buy anything, just take a look. Maybe you'll find something that you find interesting. As you can see on many of these video episodes, I'm wearing Ripple Effect Podcast gear. I'm drinking out of Ripple Effect Podcast mugs. Everything's great quality. The designs are awesome. I have tons of things to pick from. So please check out the Ripple Effect Podcast merch.com if you want to go directly to the merch store, or you can find a link in the show description or on my website, rippleeffectpodcast.com. Now to a couple of the sponsors. Content Safe is how I get all these videos out there. Matt Raymer, the creator of Content Safe, saves me tons of uploading time by syncing all my channels together, so I can't thank him enough. And if you're a content creator, podcaster, streamer, gamer, or a YouTuber who wants to expand and post his videos on many different platforms, check out Content Safe. He can help get your videos on all the platforms, all the major platforms. He will save you tons of time, and let him know you're a listener of the podcast, and he'll hook you up. Another one of my sponsors is the University of Reason and the Autonomy courses created by Richard Grove. If you're working an unfulfilling job, if you're at a crossroads in life and you're looking to just try something new, connect with a new community, meet some new people, learn some new skills, please check out the University of Reason. Check out the links in the show description or on my website that will take you there. And last but not least, check out Element Electrolytes. It's a electrolyte mix that you put in water. It adds flavor to your water. It's healthy ingredients that keep you hydrated, potassium, magnesium, sodium, all premium ingredients, no sugar, only sweetened with stevia. It won't kick you out of fasting. It won't kick you out of ketosis. It's a healthy alternative to those cheap drinks full of artificial flavors and sweeteners. And it can help with many symptoms like headaches, fatigue, muscle soreness. Maybe you have some symptoms that you might not even be aware of it, but it's due to dehydration. Or if you're just looking to spice up some water and you're sick of drinking boring water and you want to add some flavor to it, check out Element Electrolytes. Every time you use the link in the show description or the link on my website, you get a free gift. So make sure to use that link, get yourself hydrated, and help the show at the same time. We're also on Substack now, so subscribe to us on Substack. We have a Telegram group chat if you want to connect with myself or other listeners. And I believe that's it. Enjoy this amazing, amazing conversation, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace. Awesome. Thanks so much for being with me.
Sure.
We have some mutual friends, Zach Forries and Miriam, and I've had quite a few whistleblowers on the show before. I've had Zach Forries being one of them, the UN Iraq food for oil scandal whistleblower, Michael Suzanne and Thomas Drake, and quite a few. But I will say you're the first whistleblower that actually makes me nervous having you on because seeing and hearing interviews with you in the past, all the weird things that have happened to you since, it is a little concerning. But it also, I think, highlights how important your podcast or your information is, and how important this podcast could be. Personally, I think that the podcast you did with Joe Rogan was probably one of the most important podcasts of JRE ever. I think there was so much information in that, and you really did a great job of highlighting how serious this really is. Because I think sometimes people dismiss it, like they kind of feel like, oh, like, oh yeah, we know we're being listened to. And I think you really kind of emphasized. Well, it was kind of funny at certain points because I almost felt like Rogan didn't really understand the bigger picture, or maybe he did, and maybe he didn't. He I know sometimes he likes to ask a lot of questions or seem naive to basically get the guest to speak a little more or expand on certain topics. But I couldn't figure out if it was that or he didn't really understand the social engineering factor of it. The points that you were making that I think I mean, it's scary when you think about it. Much like yourself, I have some kids that I'm concerned with their future and just how big tech can mold who they are and what they think. And like you were saying on that show and many other interviews and times you speak, I mean, if you control the information, then you control our thoughts, you control our opinions, you control who we are, what we think, what we feel. And it's almost an unfair battle because they have the best minds and research and money and resources into figuring out how to do those things. And yet we're just kind of going on our everyday life thinking that there's no real evil behind any of this. But before I go on a long rant about how important all this is, for people listening who might not be familiar with some of your background, because this specific type of big tech research wasn't your initial research that you used to focus a lot on, and now it's taken up a lot of it's taken a lot of your attention now, but it wasn't initially like that. Can you give people a little bit of an origin story on who you are and what got you here?
Sure. I've been a psychologist, specifically a research psychologist, for more than 40 years. My PhD is from Harvard University. I was the last doctoral student of probably the most famous psychologist who ever lived, B.F. Skinner. And for, I'd say, the first 30 years of that 40, I was doing lots of research on lots of different topics, some of which got people's attention. I did publish 15 books and hundreds of articles, and I was looking at topics like love, how love can be built deliberately over time. I was studying people in arranged marriages in which people had, built very strong, loving relationships. I did a lot of work on teenagers and published a book on that, which got cited by the U.S. Supreme Court in an opinion co-written by Antonin Scalia, although I'm not a conservative. That book also won an award from a libertarian organization, although I'm not a libertarian. But that book is called Teen 2.0, and its subtitle is Saving Our Families and Children from the Torment of Adolescence. And it's about letting young people grow up and enter the adult world as soon as they can demonstrate competence. So, which was the case, used to be the case until 100 years ago, and is still the case in many countries. And in countries where young people are allowed to enter the adult world, work side by side with so-called adults, early on, that there's no conflict. There's no turmoil during those teen years. That turmoil comes from the fact that we isolate young people from adults, and we don't recognize their competence, their abilities, and some of them get very upset. We keep calling them children when they're far past puberty, and some of them get depressed, and some of them become suicidal. So suicide is the third leading cause of death among our teens. But if you look in other countries which allow young people to enter the adult world around the time of puberty, or when they demonstrate competence, there's no conflict with adults. There's no teen turmoil, teen depression, teen suicide. We've invented all those problems. So that was a big research area for me. I published some books on creativity, did a lot of research on creativity and other topics as well. But then about 10 years ago, in fact, it happened to be January 1st, New Year's Day of the year 2012, I got a bunch of messages, email messages from Google saying my website had been hacked and they were blocking access. Well, websites get hacked. That's not such a big deal, but that was the first little kind of thing that got me curious. And you don't want to get me too curious, because I dig in. And that's what happened, because I began to wonder, why was I getting notified by Google? Why not some government agency? Why not some nonprofit organization? Who made Google the sheriff of the internet? And then I also got curious about how they were blocking me, because they should not have been able to block me. They were blocking me not only through their search engine, which that's understandable, but they were blocking me through Firefox, which was a browser run by a nonprofit organization called Mozilla. Little did I know that 90% of Mozilla's donations came from Google. I didn't know that at the time. But they were even blocking me through Apple products, through Apple Safari. That took me a long time to figure out, but eventually I did. But by the end of 2012, I published a very big article, which was called something like "Why Google Must Be Regulated." I had so many concerns by the end of that year. And then I started looking at some of the research that was being done about search results. This was coming out of the business world, the marketing world. Basically, marketers were obsessed with the fact that wherever your product or your company or your name ends up in search results makes a big difference. If you can get a little higher in search results, you can make a lot more money, or your business will survive. If you get knocked down lower, your business might fail. And so marketers were starting to do studies about this, and they found the higher a result was in search results, the better. The more people believed in that, and they thought it was by far the best, because an algorithm, people don't even know what an algorithm is, but because an algorithm and Google's algorithm in particular was recommending it, it must be good. So that's where I started getting very curious. I thought, well, if that's true, then maybe we could use search results, just the search rankings, to alter people's opinions about things. Minor things like where to go on vacation, where to go out to dinner, or really, really big things like who to vote for. And so in early 2013, I conducted the first of many, many experiments, which have not stopped to this day, to see if I could use biased search results to shift people's opinions and their voting preferences. And I thought I probably could. I thought I could shift people's voting preferences by 2 or 3%, which doesn't sound like much, but a lot of elections are very close. So 2 or 3% among undecided people, that could flip a close election. But the first experiment, we got a shift of 43%, not 2 or 3%. So I figured this was an error, and we repeated it with another group of people. And these were not college students, by the way. This was a wide range of people who look like the American voter, the whole age range, minorities. And we really worked hard to get good samples of people, and we got a shift of I think 63%. And by the third experiment, I began to realize, wait a minute, we have really stumbled onto an incredibly powerful mind control machine. And by the third experiment, we also had figured out how to shift people's thinking and shift people's voting preferences without them knowing that we're doing it. So now you've got this incredibly powerful mind control machine that people can't even see. So it's subliminal. We used to get excited about possible, subliminal control that was occurring maybe in movie theaters or something. But this truly is subliminal in the sense that people can't see it. And yet it's having a huge effect on people's thinking. They have no idea that this is even occurring. And the scariest thing of all that we discovered is that this kind of technique uses ephemeral content. It creates ephemeral experiences. So ephemeral is the key term here. That means the content's appearing, it's having an impact, the content goes away, the search results, and then it's gone forever. It's not stored anywhere. You can't go back in time and see what search results people were being shown. And that means that here was a mind control technique, extremely powerful, one of the most powerful ever invented in the history of humankind. And it can be used without anyone knowing and without leaving a paper trail for authorities to trace. And by the way, what does it cost a company like Google, if they want to manipulate people like this? It costs them zero, nothing, zero. So just kind of mull that over for a bit. Just mull that over for a bit, because this was a huge discovery. Our first experiments got reported by the Washington Post in early 2013, and then we published a big paper on this in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, one of the most prestigious journals in the world in all the sciences. And that was in 2015. But I have never stopped doing this kind of research, and it takes up probably 80–90% of my research time, because it's fascinating, it's important, and it is scary. It is as scary as hell. You have no idea the even in the last couple of days, the numbers I've been looking at, the new techniques that we've stumbled onto. Let me just go completely off track here for a second, because when I saw a few days ago the Washington Post breaking story about Mudge Zatko, Peter Zatko, who used to be head of security at Twitter. Wow, my head exploded, because I read that very differently than most people do, because I know things about Twitter's ability to shift opinions and voting preferences that at this point nobody else knows, because it's our research, and we're the only team in the world that does this kind of research. But the point is, if Elon Musk knew what's in our new data, his head would spin, because if you take what Zatko revealed about poor security at Twitter and the ability that a lot of people have to manipulate Twitter feeds, and you take our new data, which is rock solid, you take our new data about the power that tweets have to shift people's thinking, it's mind-blowing. It's completely mind-blowing. It means here's another mind control machine, which apparently is out of control, according to Zatko, and that can be co-opted, could be used by the Chinese to impact us, by the Russians to impact us, by bad actors, by employees at Twitter who have their own agenda. It's a powerful mind control machine. So I could go on and on and on. Obviously, I mean, Joe Rogan and I talked for 3 hours, so I could, you know, I could just go on. But I have to emphasize, though, that this is not just important stuff that people don't know about. It really is scary. We get scared when we look at our numbers. We get scared when we're writing up a manuscript. We get scared when we're going through the process of trying to publish in scientific journals. It's very frightening.
Well, that's the part that I want to emphasize, and I want people to kind of grasp, is just how serious this really is. And I want to get into some of those details. I remember this video I ran into some years ago called "Free is a Lie." It's on YouTube. I'm sure you've seen it. And I would say, because it's short, you kind of get the picture. Like, we have all these free services, Google's free, this is free, and we are sacrificing things, and we're sacrificing a lot. And that's the thing, that we kind of are living in a world where people are almost content with all their personal information being stolen and used and spied on. And I don't know, it might have been that video where they talked about how if somebody said, hey, I go in your mailbox every day, make a photocopy of your mail, and but I put it right back, don't worry about it, I don't touch it, it looks exactly the same. Like, would you be okay with that? Most people would say no, but yet the exact same thing is happening in the digital realm, and we're all content and okay with it.
Well, what's happening in the digital realm is bigger than that. It's much bigger, because at least someone could explain to you about what they did with your mail, pulling it out of your mailbox and looking at it and photocopying it. But what's happening in the digital world is much more sophisticated, and it's occurring on a scale that's almost impossible to get your head around, because Google, for example, isn't just reading your Gmails. It isn't just tracking what you search for using their search engine. It's not just reading all your Google Docs, where you write your business documents or your papers for school. It's actually surveilling people over more than 200 different platforms, the vast majority of which no one has ever heard of. And Google's terms of service says that they have a right to track you if you're using any of their services, whether you know you're using them or not. So, quick example, millions of websites to track the people who come to their websites, they use another free, in quotes, free Google service, which is called Google Analytics. So millions of websites have Google Analytics installed. It's invisible to users, completely invisible, but it helps the owners of those websites track activity. Well, here's the problem. The problem is that means that when people go to those websites, Google is tracking you. Every single thing you do on millions of websites, Google is tracking. Why? Because those websites are using Google Analytics, and that gives them the right to track everything you do on every page of every website. So I'm just saying, it's not just kind of semi-obvious tools we're using that are used for surveillance. It's many, many, many different tools that most people are unaware of. And the surveillance is just one piece of this huge, ugly puzzle. There's the censorship, the fact that a couple of these big companies, they decide right now what 3.5 billion people around the world can see and can't see. That's a lot of power. And then there's what I study, which is the scariest part, which is the manipulations. Because I have people all the time say to me, well, so what that they're surveilling me? I mean, I haven't done anything wrong. Yeah, but but you don't understand what they're using all that data for. It's not just to catch bad guys, for intelligence agencies, which they do. They use it to model our minds, to model our behavior, to make predictions about what we want and what we're going to do next. And that, if you can do that, if you can predict, you can control. So they are using all that data to control. I'm not exaggerating, more than 3.5 billion people now around the world. I mean, that's control on a scale that nobody, I mean, the most horrible dictator of all time has never even imagined control possible on that scale. And by the end of this calendar year, they'll be past 4 billion. And they're unregulated. There are no laws restricting what they do. They have total free hand to surveil as much as they want, censor as much as they want, and manipulate as much as they want. No governments are touching them. And the US is the worst of all.
Yeah, even during the COVID lockdown, I was, I thought a lot about how many people could be tricked into the mainstream narrative because basically they're getting all their information online. I would have conversations with people and be like, hey, there are doctors who say that there's some dangers in the lockdowns and that there's, this virus isn't as serious as they're making it out to be and all these things. And yet, I was always concerned about that person going home, trying to research some of the things I was talking about, and then thinking I'm a lunatic because I couldn't find any of the things I was talking about on Google or YouTube, which are the two biggest search engines. And it really makes you think like, oh my God, the censorship thing. I mean, you literally are molding the way people look at a event by suppressing whatever opinions you want and pushing forward any opinions you like. And and that was a huge issue. I got kicked off YouTube during 2020 or 2021, somewhere around there, for having Dr. Robert Malone on and Dr. Pierre McCullough.
Right.
And these people who, much like yourself, have to emphasize that they're not political or they're not, left or right or whatever. They're just people with opinions and research, and they're trying to bring that forward. But unfortunately, they were only interviewed on a lot of right-wing type of shows because they're the ones who were willing to have them on. And then even Zach Voorhees, who created Blast.video. I don't know if you've checked out his new little platform he created, but which is pretty cool and really necessary. And but yeah, I mean, this censorship thing, the last couple of years, you really saw how much it can help, big pharma or some government who wants to force feed you big pharma's propaganda. But yet, other doors opened up because I think the censorship became so obvious that now people were finally using Rumble and BitChute and Rockfin and these other platforms, because it's like, okay, now it's like it's so ridiculous that I can't find any alternative perspective on YouTube or Google. I have to use these other platforms. But the truth is, it's not just Google, right? Like our Android phones, our iPhones, our whatever Amazon product you're using, it's just about everywhere, right? How do you avoid it?
Well, if people want some tips on that point, they can go to an article of mine, which is at the link myprivacytips.com. And that article begins as follows. I have not received a targeted ad on my mobile phone or my computer since 2014. That's how I start. So if you really want to protect your privacy of your family members, your kids, there are ways to do it. You know, the tech lords, the people who run these big tech monopolies, they don't let their kids use the internet because they understand how dangerous it is, and they understand how it's being used. But the point is, if you want to use tech and you want to use the internet in a way that protects your privacy, go to myprivacytips.com and you'll see some of the things that I do. You know, it can be done, but the vast majority of people are unaware. The vast majority of people think they're aware and they don't care. And that's not going to change. It doesn't matter how many tiny little platforms people build, you know, as alternatives to the monopolies. That's not going to make any difference at all. I mean, Google handles 92% of search in pretty much every country in the world except China and North Korea, where people don't have internet. The next largest search engine handles about 2% of search. So, you know, they can't impact an election. They can't impact much of anything. But if you're controlling 92% of search as Google does, then you can have a huge impact. You can pick the winners. You can determine who wins elections. We figured out by 2015, the Google search engine alone was determining the outcomes of upwards of 25% of the national elections in the world. And that number has gone up since because more people are using the internet. So the more people who use the internet, the more control Google has. And Facebook is scary. Twitter is scary. You know, it's not just Google, but Google is the worst because it was founded by utopians. They've been hiring people with similar values for a long time. And they are the worst. I mean, among other leaks from Google, there's a PowerPoint presentation, which I've written about, called The Good Censor. And they explain in the PowerPoint presentation, which is was meant for internal viewing only, but they explain that, look, of course we have to make decisions about what we show people and what we don't, but we're a good censor because we have good values. So what we censor is the right stuff to censor. Well, I mean, who on earth gave them that authority, gave them that power? Nobody. They seized it. They took it. And they took away control from us, the people. And because they're not accountable to the public. They're not accountable. The people who run these big companies are accountable only to their shareholders. That's it. They just have to make money for their shareholders. But another leak, very weird, scary thing. An 8-minute video that came from Google's advanced product division, never meant to leave Google. It's a video called The Selfish Ledger. And it's about the ability that Google has to re-engineer humanity. They call it resequencing behavior, according to, quote, company values. That's actually in there. I published a transcript of The Selfish Ledger. If people go to my one of my websites. It's very easy to, you can to get the transcript of the Selfish Ledger, or a link to watch the 8-minute video. But the transcript is in a way even more informative, because I've put, I've highlighted certain passages which are which I'm very concerned about. So, we know now from whistleblowers like Zach Voorhees and quite a number of others now have come forward. And I'm in touch with people at Google who are thinking about becoming whistleblowers. So I'm always kind of 2 steps ahead, which makes me, twice as afraid. But we know from whistleblowers, we know from leaked emails, we know from leaked documents, because Zach took with him 950 pages of documents. And we know now from leaked documents and whistleblowers from Facebook, and then very recently, a very highly placed person who left Twitter, who's goes by the nickname Mudge. His last name is Zatko. We're learning that all the warnings that I've been giving people now for 10 years, we're learning more and more from the research, from the leaks, from the whistleblowers, that all these things I've been warning about are true. They're true. The companies deny, but they're true. When I testified before a congressional committee in 2019, and just before me, an executive from Google testified, raised his right hand. I think that was my left hand, but he raised his right hand. He swore to tell the truth and all that. And then a senator asked him, does Google have blacklists? And he said under oath, no, we have no blacklists. Well, I had published in 2016 an investigative article in US News and World Report. I highly recommend it to people. It's called The New Censorship. It was about 9 of Google's blacklists. No, I had never seen them. Google denied having them, but I wrote about 9 of their blacklists because I'm a programmer. I have been my whole life. So I know that these blacklists exist from the way, Google's software works. So I wrote about 9 of them. So here it is, 2019, Google representative says, no, we have no senator, we have no blacklists. It was just about 3 weeks later, roughly, that Zach walks out of Google with 950 pages of documents, including 3 documents which are called blacklists. Now think of the arrogance here, because if you were preparing blacklists inside your company, would you call them blacklists? I wouldn't. I'd call them shopping lists or something, but they're actually called blacklists. Zach walked out with 3 of them. 3 of them. Of course they have blacklists, and those blacklists determine what people can see and what they cannot see. And if you can't see something, if you can't get access to certain information, then the conversation is not complete. The thinking is not complete. And that means they're in control of the conversation. They're in control of the thinking. And that's the way things stand. And again, no regulations, no laws.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I've been very close to, or are very intrigued with natural remedies and just alternative ways of taking. Well, I think they're called alternative now, but really, it's the way we've always taken care of ourselves, and that's by eating and moving and getting sunlight and other more natural ways of taking care of our bodies instead of constantly going to the doctor and getting a prescription written for you. So being in that realm, I've seen a lot of suppressed doctors and treatments, and I've had Dr. Brzezinski on. I've had so many different people who have been suppressed, and Del Bigtree and Dr. Brian Hooker. It's like, okay, if you're in that world of big pharma propaganda, you could see like, okay, they're in cahoots, like big tech and big pharma. They're constantly suppressing this type of information. They're constantly suppressing any alternative perspectives or views or documentaries. And even Dr. Brian Hooker He was in the Vax documentary. I mean, he was really a part of the CDC whistleblower story. It wasn't really a anti-vax documentary. It was more about this specific story of Dr. Brian Hooker and how he got hooked up with Dr. William Thompson and what the CDC was kind of hiding or suppressing from the public. But so you could see all this, but then it always makes you wonder, like, okay, are they just people who believe in the system, the medical system? Are they people who maybe just think they're doing some good, or are they truly evil and they know that what they're doing is suppressing information and manipulating information and manipulating what we know and our understanding of the world. Which one is it? Because you talked briefly about their values. Is their value, like, do they truly believe it's for their greater good, or is it darker than that?
Oh, I think most of them in big pharma and big tech believe that they're doing good, that they're doing the right thing. On the other hand, there really are alternatives that people need to be aware of. And the problem with big tech and the role they're playing in all of this is that they control our access to information. So, you know, that's in a way that's a bigger problem than having the pharmaceutical companies try to influence medical doctors and what they prescribe and how they treat. In my opinion, it's a much bigger problem to have these gateways to knowledge, gateways to all knowledge, being controlled by people who have an agenda. They have a very strong agenda. Now, let's, for example, switch over just for a few minutes to COVID-19. I'm vaccinated. I'm fully vaccinated. I'm glad I am, because the people I know who have not gotten vaccinated, including one of my daughters, have gotten very sick. One of my staff recently got very sick. She had a very bad case of COVID for more than 2 weeks. We're not sure yet whether she's going to be one of the long haul victims. I had a mild case of COVID right in the very beginning, and my sense of smell has been gone now for over 2 years. So, COVID is scary. I did get vaccinated for various reasons, and I think it's helped me in the sense that when I've been exposed to COVID, I've either not gotten sick, or I've had very mild cases. Okay, so far so good. But in March of 2020, I published an article on an alternative to vaccines, an alternative to lockdowns, which is called the Carrier Separation Plan, CSP. And I got in touch with people I knew at the White House. I was in regular touch with a member of Trump's coronavirus task force, a PhD there, and people were excited about it at the White House. And I got on to Tucker Carlson talking about it. He was thrilled. Glenn Beck called it a genius idea. I hope the president would take it very seriously. I talked to members of Trump's family whom I know, and there was very strong interest. So what is CSP? CSP is kind of like what the Chinese have been doing, except without all the crazy parts. So CSP just means that you develop a very cheap testing device that looks like a little home pregnancy test or a home, plastic electronic thermometer, which you don't have to stick up your nose. You just stick in your mouth, you wait a few minutes, boom, it tells you whether you're positive or negative. And that could have been done very quickly. The Chinese eventually developed such devices. We could have done it too, easily. You use the US mail to send dozens of these to every household in America. And then Trump gets in front of a microphone. So in theory, he was supposed to do this in the summer of 2020. And Trump announces National Testing Day, which would have been on September 16th of 2020, which is the 400th anniversary of the day the Mayflower set sail for America. A speech was actually written for Trump. At one point, it was sitting on the desk of his head speechwriter. If he had gotten in front of a mic and read this little speech, which was less than a page long, that would have been his Gettysburg Address. Because what happens if you use this plan is everyone tests on the same day. So Trump's on TV, Melania's testing, their kids are testing, all the celebrities they know, all members of Congress and mayors and governors, everyone's testing. We're all doing it together. And by the way, the people who would normally not want to participate, those are Trump's followers. So Trump could have gotten everyone to do this because the Democrats would have done it because it's the right thing to do, obviously. And Trump supporters would have done it because Trump said, do it. Everyone would have tested. And then that same day, the carriers, the people who are testing positive, they have to quarantine, but only for a few weeks. It's not months. It's not months. It's a few weeks. If they don't have a place to go, they call an 800 number. We give them a hotel room. It's only a few weeks that they have to quarantine. And everyone else goes back to work, church, and school the same day. And that's the end of masks. That's the end of social distancing and no need for a vaccine, because what happens is when you separate the carriers from everyone else, the virus cannot spread. It stops. It literally stops cold. Now you're going to miss some people, right? So, some carriers are going to end up going back to work. And so what do you do for that? And this is where the Chinese made a mistake. You have to do secondary screening. So you have barrels full of these little test devices at entrances to theaters and businesses and churches and so on. And by the way, all of this is voluntary. So you keep your privacy. If you want to get paid, then you have to sign up for something and we'll pay you, but then you lose your privacy. So it's all voluntary. I ended up publishing, I think, 6 or 7 articles in 2020. I was on lots of big shows, getting lots of praise. This is, in fact, what the Chinese have been doing, but they've been doing it kind of in a very harsh way. But what the Chinese have done is if they find a case in a big building, they test everyone in the building immediately. They send the carriers home. Everyone else goes back to work. If they find it in a small town, they test everyone in the small town, separate the carriers, everyone goes back to work. They've done it in cities as large as 11 million. Lately, they've run into some problems because Shanghai is too big. And if the area is too big, then it's hard to do this well. But the bottom line is, in July of 2020, Donald Trump got it into his head that he could get the vaccine rolled out before the November election. That's what happened. And so even though he knew about this alternative, he decided to go 100% with vaccines, put all the resources over on vaccines. And on July 15th, 2020, I got a message from my contact on his coronavirus task force saying, I'm so sorry, we're not going to use this plan. By the way, he could have taken total credit for it too. I was hoping he would. And as a result, we've had more than 1 million deaths from COVID. In China, depending on which numbers you believe, all together in this country of 1.5 billion people, all together, there have been fewer than 10,000 deaths. We've had more than 1 million deaths. If Trump had allowed this carrier separation plan to go forward in 2020, by now that would have saved more than 600,000 American lives and billions and billions of dollars, hundreds of billions in the damage that was done to the economy because we were all locked down for so long. Why am I telling you about all this stuff? And by the way, I did publish an article, it was in Penthouse magazine, called The Real Coronavirus Conspiracy, and it involves big pharma and our government. But why am I telling you all this? Because there are actually 2 big industries, not one, 2 big industries that profited, obscenely off of the vaccines. One was big pharma, of course, but the other was big tech. Because big tech ended up with much, much more traffic because of people staying home and workers staying home and workers working from home. And big tech got access, almost complete access to all of our health information. In other words, they got massive amounts of data about our health that they didn't have before because they were working side by side with our government to try to, quote unquote, prevent the spread of COVID, which which wasn't done very well here. So we have two very dangerous industries. And in case it hasn't crossed your mind yet, I have pissed off both of these industries.
Oh, which is why I think what you're doing is so important, because they deserve to be pissed off, and there should be somebody pissing them off, exposing what they're actually doing. Yeah, I mean, it was very obvious that there was one narrative that they were pushing when somebody like Dr. Robert Malone, who his opinion, even if you disagree with it, should be at least considered and heard. I mean, he was a part of the mRNA technology. He understands the technology. When people like Dr. Jessica Rose, who's been on my show a bunch of times, she's in Israel and is analyzing the VAR system and the vaccine adverse reaction system. She's coming up with some very important information and data. I mean, it was the first time in history that you couldn't get a second opinion from a doctor, that one doctor was the only opinion that mattered. Everybody else was pseudoscience and whatnot. And when you saw, like I said, I got kicked off. I talk about a lot of somewhat controversial things. I've done shows, like I said, with many different whistleblowers. I've done shows on a JFK assassination, on 9/11, and yet, any medical stuff is where Google and YouTube would draw the line. And the weird thing is, when I got kicked off YouTube, and this will go into my question, another question about how much control Google really has of all of the internet. When I got kicked off YouTube, one thing that I found was that when I got kicked off YouTube, it's funny because I found out about it because the next day I use YouTube TV. The next day I didn't have access to my YouTube TV account, and I'm like, oh boy, I think I got kicked off. And I went to my YouTube channel, completely gone. They still did charge me for YouTube TV, which was hilarious. But when they kicked me off YouTube, it was harder to find my show on Google. You couldn't find my show on Google. And I would refer friends to a specific episode. If somebody's like, hey, have you done a show on the ketogenic diet? Have you done a show on this or on that? I'm like, yeah, here's a show with Dr. Dominic D'Agostino. I'll put in the Ripple Effect podcast in Google. I'll put Dr. Dominic D'Agostino. I put all the exact information of the title of the show, and it wouldn't come up. And I'm like, this is insane, because I spell things wrong all the time, and Google has such advanced algorithms that they know what I'm looking for and what to suggest. And now I'm putting the exact title of the show, and they're suppressing it completely. And it ended up having a huge hit on my show, many other people's shows. And I know shadow banning gets thrown around a lot. But I think it was happening. I think it's still happening. And I think some people might just use that term as a reason to why their show's not bigger than maybe they'd like it to be. Oh, I'm being shadow banned. That's why the show's not so big. But I think in many cases, if you're talking about especially these specific type of topics, without a doubt, you're being shadow banned. Facebook, I don't know if it was a whistleblower or how it came out during 2020 or 2021 about the vaccine hesitancy score type thing, where it's like if you said anything that was kind of anti-vaccine or around that idea of being skeptical of vaccines, like you get a score. Once you get to a certain score, they start suppressing you completely. And so it's like, it's not just Google. And the thing about Google, and you talked about it on the Rogan show, and I believe in other interviews also, that weekend, that Saturday, where they basically shut down the internet for 40 minutes or whatever it may be. And it seems surreal, like this idea of like, how does Google shut down the whole internet when there's so many different websites and all that stuff? But they basically, the reason why I think you focus a lot on Google specifically is because they basically do have control of the whole internet, because so many other websites and browsers and stuff get all their information via Google, right?
Well, there's lots of reasons why they have such power. but the main reason why I think I focus on them is because it's because of they're not just focused on money. I have trouble explaining this to people because everyone assumes that everything's got to be about money. Well, I think it is largely about money for Facebook. When Frances Haugen uh, ratted on the company last year, she brought a lot of documents with her, and those documents showed that Facebook will allow false and inflammatory content to spread on Facebook because that generates more traffic and that generates more money. So she found documents that actually said this, internal documents from Facebook. So they're very, very money oriented. I think Twitter is money oriented. I think most of these companies are. But one reason why I end up focusing so much on Google is because they have other priorities, which makes them, in my opinion, far more dangerous than other companies. They really have utopian leaders. They really think that they know what's best for humankind. They're really extremely interested in that message that came from that 8-minute video I mentioned. They're interested in the prospect of re-engineering humanity. Creating a more perfect world. And they're more aggressive than these other companies in number one, in surveillance, number two, in censorship, and number three, in manipulation. So to me, that should be target number one. But we've actually expanded our research quite a bit now, looking more and more at other companies and other techniques that are out there besides what we call SEAM, which is the search engine manipulation effect. We've now been looking at about a dozen such techniques. We found lots of scary techniques out there that people are unaware of and that are being used to shift people's thinking. Because all of the major tech companies lean to the left, as I do to some extent, because they all lean left, that means that a lot of these techniques are being used to support the same kind of thinking, the same kind of candidates, the same parties. So that's pretty creepy. So we're actually doing research now, what we call MPE, the multiple platform effect, where we're using, on the same research subjects, we're using multiple techniques that come from different platforms to see whether we can push opinions farther and farther. And so far, it looks like we can, of course. So, but Google should be our main concern. And so, I have come up with two ways to stop them. I mean, to stop them cold. And I actually did stop them at the end of 2020. I got them to stop their manipulations in the Senate runoffs in Georgia. And I did publish the day before I testified before that congressional committee. I did publish an article in Bloomberg Business Week about how to very quickly to end Google's worldwide monopoly on search. It's very doable. It's a very simple, straightforward method, which the editors at Business Week were very, very thrilled about at first. And then someone there high up started communicating with someone at Google, I think to do fact checking. And then all of a sudden the piece got pulled from their print edition, almost got pulled from their online edition. It was literally last minute. And after a lot of infighting, that they finally decided to publish my proposal the day before I testified. But the point is that there are some things that can be done. And the longer we wait to do them, the harder it's going to be to do them, because we are up against the most powerful mind control machine that's ever existed. And what do you do if the mind control machine doesn't want you thinking bad things about the mind control machine? What do you do then?
Yeah, and I remember reading articles some years ago about how big tech was hiring a lot of psychologists and and it's like, okay, why are they not hiring programmers? And so that's obviously concerning. The other thing too that I wanted you to highlight was also how our information is never really deleted. Our
Yes, yes.
right? Because we it's like this illusion that we're deleting our history and our browsing information and all that stuff, but it's never, none of that stuff. I mean, it's basically online or saved and stored forever.
Yes, this is something, again, people don't understand. These companies lie. Most of us are raised uh, to tell the truth, and some of us, like me, naively believe that everyone around me is telling me the truth at all times. So, wow, have I been taken to the cleaners over and over again. It's like they can see me coming from a mile away, I've been told by friends. But these companies lie. So, I mean, bald-faced lies. So, so when they say, oh, you own your data and you can request that it be deleted at any time, those are two lies. They're absolute lies. The most that they will do is they will make it impossible for you and other people to see your data. So now you can't see your data and it looks like it's deleted, but they haven't deleted anything. They're not going to delete your data. That's gold. That's platinum. That's diamonds. They're not going to throw that stuff in the garbage. So your data are still there. And what's worse is they still keep building your profile, except you can't see your profile. So I was on an airplane. I was sitting next to a dentist, and he told me very proudly that he doesn't have a Facebook profile. I said, well, do your kids have Facebook profiles? Oh, yeah. Does your wife have one? Yeah. Other people you know have Facebook? Oh, yeah. I know lots of people have Facebook profiles. I said, well, then guess what? You have a Facebook profile. You just can't see it. Facebook has been building a profile on you that has photos. It has information about your likes and dislikes. It has your whole world is in your Facebook profile, but you can't see it. And you also can't request that it be deleted because Facebook will deny that it exists. So they have tens of millions of these shadow profiles. They come from people who've either quit Facebook, but their profiles are still there and they're still being expanded, or people who've never even been on Facebook. They still have Facebook profiles, and all the information is coming from other people. Your
How
your profile is being built with information from other people.
No, I was just gonna say, how is that useful to Facebook? Because if you're not using Facebook, how do you take that information that you know about that person and manipulate them if they're not using it?
It's the same. It's the same as people who know they have a profile. They're using it to connect you with advertisers, and they make money off of every connection that they make. They're using it to predict and model your behavior, and of course that can be used to control you. The more they know about you, the easier it is that they can control you. I'll just give you an example. I just came the other night. I had some wonderful friends over for dinner I hadn't seen for a while, and it's a married couple, and the woman has been saying to me over and over again, "I'm not worried about the surveillance because I have nothing to hide." I said, okay, I finally thought of something that will upset you. She goes, what? I said, well, you're a shopper, right? She goes, oh yeah, I love to shop. I said, I know. I said, I'm glad I don't have any money. If I had money, I would do no research. I would just be shopping all the time. And so I said to her, so you think that it's okay that they have all this information about you. Do you realize that they are altering the prices that you pay? So in other words, it's not just the content that you're getting, the search results, or the news feeds or any other content that you're getting, the YouTube sequences, the YouTube up next suggestion, and on and on and on. It's not just the Twitter feed. It's not all that, just all that stuff that's being personalized. I said, even the prices that you are being charged for goods you buy online, those are being adjusted based on what information has been collected about you. They know that you come from a certain socioeconomic class. They know how much you will pay. They know how much you're willing to pay. And she goes, well, she said, they can't do that if I walk into a department store. I said, that's right, they can't, at least not yet. I said, but if you're buying things online, they can do that easily. So I've promised her I'm going to sit down with her when we have more time. I'm going to show her using VPNs that if we hide our identities or we move to different locations, prices will change for items that we want to buy. I mean, the fact is, look, I'm one person with one small research team. I'm the only person that I know of in the world who is studying and discovering, quantifying these phenomena every single day. I'm the only one who's built monitoring systems, which we haven't talked about, but I'm sure there's a heck of a lot I don't know about what they're doing. I'm sure they're collecting a lot more data than I know about, and I'm sure they're using the data they collect in ways that I haven't yet discovered. The problem is bigger than I am, much bigger. It's bigger than all of us. It's a horrible, horrible problem for humanity. It's a horrible problem for our children who are being brainwashed without us knowing, without us understanding. And it's a horrible problem for democracy, which has been completely undermined. President Eisenhower, in his last speech as president, he talked about the rise of the military-industrial complex, and everyone always quotes that. But that same speech, he talked about the rise of a technological elite. That's his phrase, a technological elite that will someday control public policy without us knowing. And that's where we are. I mean, one of the pieces I published recently is called "The Technological Elite Are Now in Control." And they are.
Years ago, I had somebody from the documentary. It's a Canadian documentary called "The Corporation," and it goes into, basically how corporations use all the science and colors and research to get us to buy their product, want their product, and all that stuff. And many of my listeners are familiar with Edward Bernays and propaganda and his book Propaganda, and his understanding of how a lot of our decision making is subconscious, and it's there's outside influences and things swaying our perspective from one way to another, and we don't even know it. We think that we would pick up on it, but we won't, and we don't. And there's even that I think it was the show Brain Games, or maybe some other show, where they had a bunch of Instagram content creators who they put them in like a room, and they're like, hey, take selfies and basically be creative. And he talked to them for a little bit, and then they took all these selfies, and then he's like, oh, it's funny because before you guys got here, I took all the same selfies. And then he breaks down how he basically was hinting ideas to them without them knowing, which they thought they were having these organic thoughts of like, oh yeah, I should take a picture in front of this, or I should take a picture in front of that. And it wasn't organic. He hinted those things. And so that's kind of the type of thing that's constantly going on. And when my kids are on YouTube and they're looking at videos, the next video that's suggested, I don't know why it's suggested. I don't know why another video isn't. And, so there's all, when you're on Twitter, Facebook, all these things, why certain things are popping up and other things aren't, not knowing those things and knowing that it's not organic. It's not like this is the next post that just was posted on Facebook, so that's what I'm seeing next. It's like, no, they're being manipulated. That's scary. And there's a lot that's going on that we're just not aware of. And that's why I think your show with Rogan was so important, and the information you're bringing to light is so important. And there has been people and other people in the past too. Like I've had Douglas Ruskoff was like one of my first guests on my show in like 2013, and he always seemed like he had the skepticism of big tech and social media and the pros and cons of technology. And there's also that documentary, Terms and Services May Apply. I think that's the title of it. It's a little older, and
Oh, it's really good though.
it's really good, very good. And it really highlighted something that we all did and didn't realize what we were doing was just like agreeing to terms and services constantly.
That's
And,
right.
but the thing is, much like what you talked about, these things aren't just like accidental. Like the reason why they're hard to read, the reason why they're very long, the reason why the writing and font is very small, like it's all for the purpose of basically promoting the idea of like, hey, this is going to take too long, let me just agree to it. And so all these things are super scary. One thing you talked about too I remember on the Rogan podcast was like how, because I have an Android, and you were talking about why the battery dies so quickly sometimes, and all the, why it slows down sometimes. And that's something that I wasn't even aware of, that like you could take out a SIM card, you could put it on airplane mode or turn it off. The second you turn it on and it's connected to some network, it's basically sending your information somewhere, right?
That's right. And regarding the battery issue, depending how old you are, most people will remember back a few years, it wasn't that long ago when you could take the battery out of your phone and you could replace it with a nice fresh one and therefore use your phone longer. And then all of a sudden, you couldn't take the batteries out of your phone. Okay, so maybe that's because they want to sell more phones and they want your batteries to wear down. Yeah, maybe, but that's not the real reason they did that. They soldered the batteries in. It's because they didn't want to lose information. And if the batteries are soldered in, then even when you turn it off, there's current still running. It's still operating. It is still spying. Surveillance is still occurring. So, and you can't turn it off completely because you can't remove the battery anymore. I mean, surveillance has gotten completely out of hand. Google purchased the Nest company a few years ago. One of the first things they did was put microphones into some Nest products. Nest makes thermostats and doorbells with cameras in them and so on. Google got caught at some point. The fact that they had put microphones into these, why does your thermostat, need a microphone? Of course it doesn't. But around the same time that Google got caught, beginning to use products like this for surveillance, what do you know? I looked up their recent patent submissions, and they were applying for patents on methods for analyzing sound coming into microphones in people's homes. Because from sounds coming into microphones in your home, they can figure out whether your sex life is good or bad, or maybe you need some products. They can figure out whether your relationship is good or bad. Maybe you need some counseling. Whether your kids are normal or abnormal, maybe they need some counseling or some drugs. Maybe they need drugs. I mean, what's happening? Of course, and then Google bought Fitbit. Now, why would you buy Fitbit? Because that gives you physiological data that you've never had access to before on tens of millions of people. Physiological data 24 hours a day, which means more products and services that they can sell. More matching up of vendors with everyday people who have no idea what's going on. People, it's not just that people don't know what's happening. They don't even know what they don't know. They just have no clue. I was sitting, I did a couple of speeches for the National Organization of Attorneys General. And I've been working with those people since 2015 because they, some of them want to correct these problems. They're just having trouble figuring out how. But I was sitting next to a man who's was on the staff of a state attorney general. Next to him was his wife, who's a judge. And I'm just, talking to them like you and I are talking about these issues. And then all of a sudden the judge says, "You're not going to believe what happened to us a few nights ago." I go, "What?" She says, "Well, we have Alexa. And we love Alexa. We say, 'Alexa, play some Mozart, please.' And, she does it." And she said, "But my husband and I were talking about whatever it was, some topic or other. And then Alexa spoke up and actually said something relevant to our conversation." I said, "Well, yeah, these devices are always listening and always recording." Well, she said, that's outrageous. She said, "That shouldn't be allowed." I said, "Well, then do something about it." But again, this is something that Joe Rogan, that really, I think he really started worrying toward the end of our interview, because what he was realizing was that all of these kinds of things that I'm telling him about, no one else is investigating. No one's doing science on this. No one is building, again, we haven't talked about monitoring systems, but it's just me and my people. And who are we? I mean, who are we? Why is it just us? Why isn't there a whole institute at Harvard, trying to solve these problems? They sure as hell have a big institute on tech, and their main funder is Google. They're not tackling these problems. That's the problem, is that most research institutes and universities, they get a lot of their research money from Google. The few people who have gone after me in print, and they're very few, but the few people who've gone after me in print, 3 out of 4 of them, I've been able to determine they all got money from Google. The 4th one, I don't know what happened there, but the other 3, I found out they had gotten money from Google. How do you fight that? And for that matter, what keeps me going? Because I've had some scares, some cause for concern, and my team, sometimes my team members get scared too. And my managing director, a couple of months ago, she was in downtown San Diego, which is very, very clean, very safe, very nice, 2:00 in the afternoon on a Saturday. And she and her husband, who's, I should point out, is very handsome. I mean, I know you and I we're good, but this guy is super handsome. And they're walking down the street. Some guy runs up to them, pulls out a knife, a big knife, and slashes her husband all the way from the side of his cheek up to his ear. And then he looks at her, my managing director, and looks her straight in the eye and laughs and runs away. Now, this guy, I've seen him since, is going to require multiple surgeries over a period of years. It's not entirely clear yet how bad the nerve damage is. But I think this was a big factor. I mean, she was thinking tech, Google. She was thinking that right away, especially when the guy looked at her and laughed. And it was maybe a month later that she quit.
Wow. Well, if for people, I don't want to make you retell the story, because I know it's a very tragic one, and but if you go to, what is it? It's 128, the minute of the Joe Rogan podcast, when you talk about your wife's accident, and I'll never forget Rogan's face. It was that silence of like, it almost seems like it hit him how serious this is. People I mean, there's been it's almost weird that people can accept political assassinations in other countries. Um, Mobsters will kill each other for much less. Gangsters will kill each other for much less. I mean, what you're uncovering is much bigger, and really, I think that explains, that explains what, how his reaction explains how big he finally understands. Sorry, my kids upstairs are getting my attention. Speaking of kids, and how big of an issue this really is, and how I mean, to it seems hard to believe at first that somebody would even or even entertain the idea that these weird things that happen to yourself and people around you could be related. But when you start digging deeper into the influence, the power, the profit of it all, it seems quite possible.
Well, I think I have to give people the short version. The short version is that in that, as far as I know, these companies pretty much left me alone while I was, beginning this research and publishing it and talking about it publicly. And one of my board members said to me at one point, it's amazing that they left you alone for so long. But in the summer of 2019, that's when I testified before a congressional committee, and that's when everything started to just go into the toilet, because they basically didn't leave me alone anymore. So at one point I gave a briefing to a group of attorneys general. This was at Stanford University, and it was a private briefing. And afterwards, one of these AGs came out and said, "I'm sorry to tell you this, Dr. Epstein, but I think you're going to be killed in an accident within the next few months." And I wasn't, but my wife was. And if people want just to get a glimpse of Misty and how beautiful she was, and there's a wonderful little news story that ran on San Diego television, after the accident. And so I put it at the link mistysdeath.com, and it's just 2 minutes long, but it's really beautiful. And Misty has two eyes in it, so it's MISTI and then S. So mistysdeath.com, and then you could just at least get a glimpse of what happened. Are we still connected? Because my screen just went crazy.
Yeah, no, I was just showing a screenshot because I believe on your Instagram page, I was just showing your wife's.
Oh, yes. Well, that unfortunately doesn't connect to that news story. That news story is at mistysdeath.com. That connects to a different news story, which came out before her name was released.
But she's obviously beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she was that, you could tell by that picture, she was absolutely gorgeous.
Right, and here it is. It's 2.5 years later. I am still wearing the wedding ring. I have members of my family who, I think if they were a little bit more bold, they would use a pliers and tear it off my hand. But I'm still alone, and I still I'm still very upset. Plus, I don't really know, and I don't think I'll ever really know, why she was killed. I don't think I'll ever really know that.
And you,
so,
and you're saying that because you do believe it wasn't accidental. There was some really, I guess, weird things in regards to the car, right? The car kind of just disappeared and stuff like that kind of make you think that it was more than just an accident.
Well, there were some weird aspects to it, and the fact that her vehicle was never examined forensically, and it certainly should have been. I mean, this is a fatal accident. She's the only one who died, and this should have been investigated. no, there's some aspects of it that are still bothering me a lot. I think about them way too much, every single day. So, uh, you know, could could tech companies actually make terrible things like this happen? I would like to believe the answer is no, especially since one of Google's top executives is an old friend of mine, Ray Kurzweil. I was friends with both him and his wife, Sonia. I was on the board of a school she had for autistic children. She's a PhD psychologist, just like I am. But, they won't talk to me. They haven't talked to me in years, and they will not talk to me. I used to have dinner with Sonia fairly regularly, but because of the research I do, not because of any conflict between us, we've only been friends. We've never had any conflict at all. I mean, I went to their daughter's bat mitzvah. They came to the bar mitzvah of one of my sons, and, never any conflict. But neither one of them now will talk to me at all because of the research I do. So, these are not, I mean, I understand better than anyone in the world how big these issues are. These are issues that are determining right now the thinking and behavior, of 3.5 billion people around the world. If that isn't big, I just don't know what is. They are undermining our democracy. They are, I have no doubt, brainwashing kids around the world without the parents understanding what's happening. They're withholding content, including your content. They're withholding content so that people can't get access to it. I mean, tell me an issue that's bigger than that, except maybe nuclear war, but I don't think, nuclear war right now is affecting us every day. The stuff I'm talking about is affecting us and our kids every single day. And we turn a blind eye. Why? Why are just so few members of Congress have any concerns? Well, because almost all the Democrats are getting most of their, are getting very large campaign donations from Google. Google was Hillary Clinton's main donor in 2016. So, that takes care of the Democrats. Republicans don't like regulation. Well, that takes care of a lot of the Republicans. And even Republicans are getting money from Google, but most of it goes, about 95% of it, of the money coming from Google and its employees, goes to Democrats. And that's true, by the way, for all the tech companies, including Twitter, But there are some things that can be done. And so, I'm working very, very hard, not just on new research and looking at new methods of mind control, all of which are subliminal, but I'm also working on solving the problem. And there is a way to solve the problem with a capital T. The problem is, the enormous power that these companies have in 3 areas: surveillance, censorship, and manipulation. And there is a way, I've come to believe over the years, there is a way that we can actually get these companies under control. And the way to do it is with setting up what I call passive monitoring systems. So what does that mean? That means that we do to them what they do to us. So we have to start keeping track on a large scale of the content they're showing people. Or if it's a device like Alexa that talks, of the content they're telling people. We have to start keeping track. We don't. I mean, again, my team is the only team in the world that's been doing this and building these systems since 2016. But we've learned a lot. We're getting better and better at doing this. So what are we talking about? What do we mean? Well, in 2018, there was a leak of emails from Google to the Wall Street Journal. I had lunch actually with the reporter who wrote this article. So I kind of got the inside scoop. Basically, in the emails, one Google employee is saying to others, how can we use ephemeral experiences? There's that word ephemeral again. How can we use ephemeral experiences to change people's views about Trump's travel ban? When I read that, this is 2018, I could not believe it. I could not believe it. Ephemeral experiences, that's what I've been studying since 2013. And here inside Google, they're saying, how can we use ephemeral experiences to change people's views? And I'm thinking, my God, that's exactly what I've been studying. And they know all about this. And they actually have language that they use to describe what they're doing. Ephemeral experiences, those are those short-lived kinds of experiences. A news feed appears in front of you, or a Twitter feed or something. It's not stored anywhere, it disappears. But what happens if you capture it? If you capture it, if you preserve it, then you can analyze it. And you can see how they're using all this content to influence people. So we first did this successfully in 2016, pretty small scale. We had 95, we call them field agents in 24 states. We equipped their computers with their permission. We equipped them with special software, which we call passive monitoring software. So then when they were doing political searches on Google, Bing, or Yahoo, we kind of took a snapshot. Whenever they did any kind of political searches, we took a snapshot of the first page of search results. We grabbed the links. We grabbed the web pages that the links connected to, and we preserved data. We preserved 13,000 searches, 130,000 search results, and about 98,000 web pages. And we preserved it. We actually captured some ephemeral experiences, and then we analyzed it. And when we did, we found, no big surprise here, that Google search results, but not Bing or Yahoo, Google, the one that counts, were highly biased, favoring Hillary Clinton, whom I supported. So I'm cheering. Good job, Google. But because of the research that we've been doing since 2013, we calculated that if that level of bias had been present nationwide, going to everyone for weeks or months before an election, that would have shifted between 2.6 and 10.4 million votes among undecided voters to Hillary Clinton without anyone knowing this was occurring, and except for our little monitoring project, without leaving any paper trail for authorities to trace. You cannot go back in time and see what search results they were showing people. 2018, we set up a bigger system. 2020, we went all out. We didn't have 95 field agents in 24 states. We had 1,735 field agents in 4 swing states. That's where the action is. And we didn't preserve 13,000 searches. We preserved 1.5 million ephemeral experiences on Google, Bing, Yahoo, YouTube, which is part of Google, Google's homepage, and Facebook. And we analyzed the heck out of this massive amount of data. And we found that the bias on Google alone had likely shifted 6 million votes to Joe Biden. Was that bias, same bias on Bing, Yahoo, and so on? No. But we also found that on Google's homepage, they were sending out go vote reminders more to liberals than to conservatives. Think about that. Think about that power. if you're reminding people to register to vote or to go vote, and you're doing that more for the party that you support than for the other party, think about that power. And then YouTube. This was wild. First of all, you have to know just the raw power that YouTube has. YouTube is part of Google. And 70%, this is according to another whistleblower, not Zach, a different whistleblower, but 70% of the videos that people watch on YouTube now around the world are suggested by Google's Up Next algorithm. Wow, that is power. That is power, because it means that someone's eyes are glued to a screen, and over and over again, most of the time, they're watching what Google wants them to watch. And that sometimes brings people down rabbit holes, and they get convinced of something, or they become fanatical about something because they've just watched a whole sequence of videos. Anyway, 70%, keep that in mind. But our data showed that 93% of the Up Next of the videos that were being recommended by the Up Next algorithm were coming from liberal news sources. And this was true whether these suggestions were going to liberals, moderates, or conservatives. In fact, the proportion of liberal news stories being suggested to conservatives was higher than the proportion of liberal news sources being shown to liberals. It was higher for conservatives than for liberals. So the point is, we have learned how to do this. We've learned how to do it on a larger and larger scale. Earlier this year, we got a $2 million gift to set up a permanent large-scale monitoring system in one state, which we're building right now. Then we got another gift. It was $500,000 to begin to expand the system into other states. And both of these gifts are going to allow us now for the first time to begin to look at content going to children. Why is this important? This is important because if we can get this stuff going on a larger and larger scale, which is what we're hoping to do this year, and get it into all the swing states, then we've rescued democracy from the tech companies. I'll tell you why in just a second. If we can expand this into all 50 states and we can look at content 24 hours a day that's going to kids, we will be rescuing our kids from brainwashing by the tech companies. So how do I know that? Why will this work? Because on October 30th, 2020, we went public with some of the data we had been collecting from the presidential election, which is very, very clear and very disturbing and very biased. And we went public with some of that data. And as a result, on November 5th, 2020, 2 days after the presidential election, 3 US senators sent a very detailed threatening letter to the CEO of Google saying, here's what Epstein found in the presidential election. He found all this bias, and he found this, and he found that. You know, how do you account for that? And you know what happened as a result? Google turned off the bias in the Georgia Senate races. They turned it off completely. They didn't send vote reminders to anybody. And in their search results, political search results, there was no bias at all. In fact, it was Zach who actually said to me, Zach Voorhees, he said, yeah, they can turn bias on and off. He said, like flipping a light switch. That is a quote from Zach Voorhees, like flipping a light switch. And they flipped the switch. We got them to turn off the bias. We got them to turn off the bias. And we know that for sure because we had more than 1,000 field agents in Georgia, conservatives, moderates, and liberals. We know for sure they turned it off. And that's the whole point. If we're monitoring, if we're doing to them what they do to us and our kids 24 hours a day, if we're doing the same thing to them, then guess what? They become accountable to the public for the first time. And without any laws being passed, without any regulations being enacted, they will pull back. They have to. They have to pull back because we have the data. We have massive amounts of data, which is admissible in court, which brings me to Donald Trump. Donald Trump claimed over and over again that the 2020 election was rigged, and he went to court 60 different court cases, which all of which were thrown out because he had no evidence. But I had the evidence. I have the evidence. You know, and members of his family know all about my work, and he knows about my work. He tweeted about it at one point. Why didn't anyone from, you know, his team contact me? Why didn't they bring my data to court? I will never understand that, except call me cynical, but I just don't think Trump really cares about real data or cares about real evidence. I think for him, just going to court and making a big show was all he wanted to really do. But the fact is, I have rock solid evidence, which is admissible in court, that shows how the tech companies were shifting millions of votes in the 2020 presidential election. And more important for all of us, I have data showing that they turned that switch off for the Georgia Senate races. We can stop these companies, all of them. We can stop them with large-scale permanent monitoring systems, and we can get them to back away from our kids too. And then, by the way, I can't wait to see, we're getting our first trickle of data now, and that's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it's going to become overwhelming. But I can't wait to see what the actual content is that these companies are sending to our kids. I think it's going to be so disturbing. I have 5 kids myself, so I think it's just going to be incredibly disturbing to see what our kids are actually seeing and what they're hearing on these devices, because I don't think parents have any idea.
No, they don't. And the thing is, even if you try, I like having a lot of conversations with my kids. Obviously, I started a podcast because I enjoy conversations, and it becomes a talent that that's helpful in parenting, because you try to get in their head and you try to understand their perspective and what they're thinking and all that type of stuff, and you try to help mold their worldview. You know, I'm a big fan of like being as involved in my kids' lives as possible, because like I always tell other parents, I'm like, if you're not answering their questions, if you're not putting the pieces together for them while they try to understand the world around them, then somebody else is, or something else.
That's right.
You know, like Google or YouTube or whatever. So I want to have as much influence as possible in regards to that whole journey of trying to understand the world. And it's scary because I know I can't be there all the time, and I don't know what they're watching, why they're watching, and they might not understand what they're watching and why they're watching and how it's influencing them. So even if I try to, you know, gather some information on what they're watching, or, you know, whatever it may be, it might be so subconscious, it might be so discreet that I wouldn't be able to pick up on it, and they won't even pick
That's
up
right.
on it. You know, and that's the part that's scary.
Well, and we're talking about masters of manipulation. So whatever they're doing, it's not going to be, you know, in your face. It's not going to be obvious. It's going to be subtle. And by the way, that idea is in that 8-minute film that leaked from Google called The Selfish Ledger, you know, which is about re-engineering humanity. You know, that idea of subtle manipulation is very clearly stated in that film. They know how to, not just how to manipulate, they know how to do it invisibly, subtly, in ways that people are unaware of. And fortunately, that's what we study. Which brings me to billionaires. So if anyone out there knows anyone who knows Elon Musk, because he would be perfect to fund this monitoring system that we need to make permanent nationwide. If anyone out there knows Elon Musk and can get me 5 minutes with him, or Peter Thiel, or there are lots of people out there. Sheldon Adelson's widow. There are dozens of people out there who I think would understand what we're doing, would appreciate what we're doing, and we know how to do it at this point. We've been doing the research for almost 10 years, and we've been building the monitoring systems now since 2016, and we're getting good at it. And we actually had an impact in 2020 because we're getting so good at doing this monitoring. And I have wonderful, wonderful teams, and we take all kinds of precautions to keep each other, safe and healthy. But we need to expand. So right now we're building permanent monitoring system that's going to look at content going to kids and voters in one state. We have some money to help us start expanding into other states. We want to get into all the swing states if we can before the midterm elections, which will make those much fairer. In fact, if no one's monitoring, I guarantee you that these companies will be using every single one of these techniques that we've studied, and probably a dozen more that we haven't discovered yet, to shift votes. So we want to get into the swing states as fast as we can and as soon as we can before the midterms. And then after the midterms, we want to expand into all 50 states, I hope by sometime next year, and 24 hours a day be looking at content going to children, content going to adults, content going to voters, content going to people who haven't registered to vote yet, but maybe they're being pushed one way or another. We can look at many different kinds of ways in which these data are being used or abused to manipulate, because the key is to capture the data. Once you've captured it and you've protected it and you've made multiple backups and so on, once you've captured it, then it's there to be analyzed. You can go back in time and see what news feeds people were being shown, or what search results or search suggestions or Twitter feeds, or on and on and on. Once it's captured, all the stuff that's ephemeral and normally disappears forever, once it's captured, then all kinds of people can analyze those data, and authorities can analyze the data. And the Federal Election Commission and the attorneys general and the Attorney General of the US, and so on and so forth. But the key is to capture it. You have to preserve it. If you don't preserve it, it's gone forever. The one reporter that I have talked to a few times in the UK, she's done investigative articles on Google. She was just positive that Google had manipulated the Brexit vote. She was positive. But she actually wrote in one of her articles, but we'll never know, because you can't go back in time. That's the point. That's why we have to set up these systems so that we can go back in time, or we can, even better yet, do what we're doing now, which is we can analyze these, look for these manipulations, look for the bias in real time. Look for it right now. And when we see something that looks suspicious, we analyze it now and we report it now. So with real-time monitoring like that, real-time analysis, real-time exposure, one by one, these companies will fall. They'll fall like dominoes. They will have to pull back from these manipulations. They can still make lots of money, but they don't have to do it by the way they're doing it. They're really horrible, disgusting, obscene way that they're doing it now, which is by manipulating almost everybody and kids. And what are they trying to do with our kids anyway? I'm sure they're doing more than trying to get them to buy certain things. I'm sure they're doing other things. And I just can't wait to see those data. If I can survive.
Well,
so I have to say, for the
Yep.
record, because I have to say this every time I'm interviewed, ladies and gentlemen, of the listening or watching audience, I am not suicidal. So if you suddenly hear that Epstein has killed himself, it's a lie. I am not suicidal, period. Okay. If someone takes me out, it's because they've taken me out. It's not me doing it to myself.
Well,
I love the work I do. I love the process of discovery. I love trying to make the world a better place. And I am not suicidal.
yeah, yeah. Well, you do have to say that. I mean, Gary Webb said it. Danny Castellero said it. A lot of people in the past have said it. Yeah, the thing about Musk and Thiel, I run into a lot of Thiel interviews when researching Leo Strauss. I'm a big fan of Leo Strauss, and I'm always running into Thiel talking about his philosophies. And I go back and forth with Thiel and Musk. It's like sometimes I see interviews where I'm like, oh, they get it. And then other interviews, I'm like, oh my God, they're a part of it. And I don't know, and I go back and forth. And it's same thing with crypto, right? I mean, I kind of go
Right.
back and forth with crypto where I'm like, okay, is it a tool that we can use to free us, or is it going to be a tool that's going to be used to enslave us even more? And
Right. Right.
and it's hard to know. And
That's right.
it's we live in some scary times. I'll tell you, it's funny because, like I said in the beginning of this show, this was the one show that I honestly got a little bit of it's like I'm sure I'm being listened to. I've had plenty of people on this show that will probably, I guess get me their attention or whoever they are. But even recently, like my show is consistently in the like top 50 in philosophy category. I don't know, it could be coincidental, but I don't I don't know how much I believe in coincidences anymore, but it all of a sudden it's not in the top 50 and it's like barely ranked since I booked you, which is weird. I'm like, maybe it's just, slow. I don't know, but the algorithms can work against you. I met this kid who has this Instagram page where we're talking about soccer. We're both big soccer fans, and he does these little soccer videos. And he said within like a couple weeks, he went from like 6,000 followers to 122,000 followers. And I'm like, what did you do? And he's like, I don't know. He's like, I don't know where. And I'm like, really? I'm like, then for some reason, I'm like, those algorithms have has been suggesting your show. And it made you think about like, okay, how much power those algorithms have. They can make or break somebody as a content creator. They can either suppress you, and you could make you could put in all the work, you can put out what you think is good content and what you think is important. But if they decide that they don't want to, they don't want to help you out, they'll suppress you. Or you could be somebody like him who for some reason he just took off, and he didn't do anything that he could really even put his finger on, but it just blew up. And that's the power of the algorithms.
Yeah, but you're leaving out the human element, because this is something that we now know for sure, again because of leaks and whistleblowers. It's a human who adds your name or your links to one or more blacklists. It's a human who does that. Humans decide, for example, at Twitter, this is one of the things we've learned now from this new whistleblower. At Twitter, it's humans who decide whether or not something is going to be able to go viral or whether it's going to be suppressed. It's humans who determine whether content gets throttled. So don't underestimate the human element here. Algorithms are as dumb as doorknobs. They're not even slightly intelligent, not yet. And humans are there behind the scenes. Content is constantly getting booted up by the algorithm for human review, and then humans make decisions. The simplest decision they can make is to add a link or a name to a blacklist. And when it does that, from that point on, the algorithms are always checking the blacklists. And if you're on one of the blacklists or one or more, your content is hidden. So this is still it's still a human game. Algorithms are being used as the tool to make things happen, but humans are still making the key decisions, uh, which is why we've got to, we at the moment it's happening without laws, without regulations, et cetera, as I've said over and over again. But we can stop them, and the way to stop them is passive monitoring. By passive, I mean no one can see it. No one can see. When we install passive monitoring software, it's invisible on that person's computer or mobile device. It's completely invisible. And that's why that's why Google backed off when they did in 2020. If people want more information, or they want to support us, which would be really nice too, they can go to mygoogleresearch.com. That's mygoogleresearch.com. And that's got all kinds of links on it to articles I've written, interviews I've given. And it has links where you can make donations. But also, again, if anyone knows someone who can make a major gift, we need that money very quickly to get into the swing states before the midterm elections. And I'll give you just one more link, which is, this is a link that I created for the Joe Rogan show. I took my 2019 congressional testimony, the written part of it, which was longer than the than the oral presentation, which was just 7 minutes, and I expanded it, I updated it, added in lots of art and stuff, and I made a booklet which is called Google's Triple Threat. So if people want to look at that booklet, it's totally free. It's at googlestriplethreat.com. And I've updated it again since the Rogan show. So it's very, very recent stuff. And, some of our latest research findings are in this booklet. So we need help. I have to tell you, we need help. We're a lone team. We're doing something that hundreds of institutions should be working on, and we're doing it by ourselves. And as I mentioned earlier, that's really what really moved Joe the most, is when he began to realize that A, how important this stuff is, and B, that we're just doing this by ourselves. That's crazy.
And I think how discreet it is why so many people dismiss it and don't see it as a big that needs to be taken care of immediately or looked at immediately. That's why the research you're doing is so important, because you're really figuring out how they're doing it and all that, and which is really important, because that's how you fight back, is by figuring out how they're doing it. But yeah, so I was gonna say, if people can't find your website, try Googling it. Maybe it'll come up. I don't know, but it probably not. It's and you use Brave, actually, right? Because you say that's probably, because I know a lot of people, especially in the alternative media community, people would say, oh, use DuckDuckGo or use this or use Firefox, but really Brave seems like your best bet.
Brave right now is the best browser. I know Brendan Eich. He's the guy who developed Brave. Before that, he developed Firefox, and before that, he's the guy who wrote JavaScript. So he's quite an amazing guy. So I use Brave for my browser. All my staff does, and then now within Brave, they have now their own search engine. So within Brave, you can just use the Brave search engine, which works extremely well. I mean, it's awesome. I almost never have to look at any of their search engines. That's how good their search engine is. And they don't track you. They 100% protect your privacy. And there's another thing they do. They suppress all ads. So Brave runs even faster than Chrome, which is Google's browser. But Brave runs even faster because it suppresses all ads. Even those ads on YouTube videos are suppressed on Brave. So it runs lightning fast. and it does not violate your privacy. So I'm trying so hard to get people onto Brave. And again, if you go to myprivacytips.com, you'll see my other recommendations. For email, I recommend Proton Mail, which is based in Switzerland. Again, they respect your privacy so much that you can sign up for Proton Mail in under 30 seconds because they don't ask you anything about yourself. And even the Proton Mail company cannot read your emails. It's all encrypted. It's end-to-end encrypted. And then, I try to steer people toward using Signal on their mobile devices. And you can use Signal for texting, for phone calls. It works really well for phone calls and even for video calls. And Signal uses encryption too. They don't violate your privacy. So
Yeah, I use Key.
can be done.
Yeah, I use Keybase as one of them. A buddy of mine, Matt Raymer, who created Content Safe, which helps a lot of people like myself who've been canceled on YouTube and many other places. He helps out with he's another tech guy, and he has a great service. I upload my video onto one platform and he syncs all my platforms together, so my videos will within 24 hours show up on Rumble, on BitChute, everywhere. And the whole purpose is so, and then if you do get deleted somewhere or they are suppressing you on one place, you can find the content somewhere else. And also we're talking about IPFS and other options, but yeah, I mean, these we need to make people aware of how serious of an issue this really is. And I can't thank you enough for doing all the work that you're doing, for taking the time to chat. Also, if people want to learn a little bit more, I think the episode that you were on Rogan's was what was it? It was episode 1768. So I highly recommend people checking that out.
Well, even better, I set up a link to it. So EpsteinOnRogan.com will get you right there. EpsteinOnRogan.com.
Awesome. Yeah.
And I know a couple of people who watched it 3 times, which I think is insane because it's almost 3 hours long. But
I'm one of those people.
Yeah.
I think I think I've watched it more than 3 times, to be honest with you. It just it's information overload, but also it's it's a lot of information. But I think sometimes, especially when they're that long, sometimes you'll daze off or you'll be, and then I'll miss something. And then the second time or third time I'll listen and I'll be like, oh my God, how did I not pick up on, that fact that you shared or that little story or whatever, that little tidbit. So I think when shows are that long, sometimes it's hard to focus on the conversation for 3 hours if you're not in it. So it's helpful, and I've shared it with many people because that's why Miriam was actually a little bit of a help, because I know you're friends with Miriam. You've been on her show. You're Zach well, and those are mine. They've been on my show a bunch, and so I reached out. I'm like, I gotta get Dr. Robert Epstein on the show. His work is so important. For some reason, when he was on Rogan's, I'm like, it didn't scare the shit out of the world the way I expected it to. Like I expected everybody just to just be screaming, so I'm like, we need to, anything we can do to get more attention on his research. I'll more than be happy to help. And thank you so much for all the work you do, all the time you invest in this. Obviously you're not motivated by money, and you're not motivated by anything, but obviously trying to leave the world a little better than you received it. And I think that's what we're all attempting to do. And obviously a lot of weird things have happened to you, and hopefully that they're not related to your work, and just keep doing what you're doing. I can't thank you enough. I mean, I really think many of us, it's funny how many of us feel like we have this courage and whatnot. When we were talking, I was just about to get into your wife's story. I got distracted because my son I think I heard him crying upstairs, and I just freaked out. I panicked. I'm like, oh my God, like every bad scenario was going through my head. So I could just imagine, knowing how big of these stories, how big they are, and how important they are to the world. Because of course, if they can manipulate people and they know how to, why wouldn't they? And
right.
So
And don't forget, and it's legal. So, well, of course, why wouldn't they?
yeah.
Why not? Why not? Sure. By the
Yeah.
way, I'll tell you a secret here. We can end with me telling you a secret. I definitely got into Joe Rogan's head. And how do I know that? Because when I was leaving his building there, which is in a hidden location, first of all, there were these four huge guys there. They were huge men. And I said to one of them, what do you do here? And he looks down at me and he goes, security. I said, you mean people want to hurt Joe Rogan? He goes, oh yeah. I said, wow, that's something. So I'm about to literally go out the door outside, and Joe comes out of his studio and he's got his cell phone in his hand. And he says to me, what's your phone number? So I gave him the number. He types it in. He hits send. And he said, I just sent you a message. Now you have mine.
Well, he might be some help with connected with Musk, but
Maybe.
I'm convinced, and it's because Sam Tripoli, who hosts another show I do. I host two shows. I do this big Zoom conference call type show that actually was it started because of 2020 and all the suppression of all of us podcasters and content creators. And Zach Voorhees and Miriam are regulars on that show. It's called A Union Unwanted. And Sam Tripoli hosts that show with myself and Charlie Robinson and Midnight Mike. And he was just on the Rogan show, and he's friends with Rogan. He's been on the show a long time ago before it blew up, and he was just had another appearance on there recently. And I've had private conversations with Sam, and I get the sense because he was one of my inspirations when I started in 2013. I love the idea of just having long form conversation, really taking the time to dissect stories, sharing personal experiences, because I think people can really learn from just our own personal experiences. It's like that saying, a smart person learns from their mistake or from their mistakes. A smart person learns from other people's mistakes, because you can learn from other people's stories and their how they deal with their own bumps in the road. And hours and hours of listening to somebody talk, you can only bullshit for so long. Eventually who you are comes out. And
that's right.
So I like to believe that, all the hours that I've listened to of Rogan and all the stuff, that he's a sincere person who truly is just a curious person trying to
curious.
Yeah. And I'm very similar. And I think a lot of times he's much deeper down these rabbit holes than he makes it out to be. And I couldn't imagine having the platform he has, where you say anything that can be used against you. It's like, it's like during court, and anything you say will be used against you. It's like, I couldn't imagine that type of pressure. And I think he does a good job of ignoring everything. But you can only ignore so much of it. And I'm sure that probably prevents him from maybe being as outspoken as he'd like to be. But without a doubt, he's doing amazing work, having people like yourself on, and the millions and millions of people who got exposed to your work and your message because of him. Obviously, he had Dr. Robert Malone and Dr. Peter McCullough when it was very, when he knew there was going to be backlash for doing so. So hats off for people like him who are doing that but again, having that much power and having that much influence, I should say, I'm sure some weird shit has happened to him. And he talked about in I don't remember which episode, but he talked about when Bernie was on his show. One of the first politicians that was on his show, either Tulsi or Bernie, how all of a sudden he started getting a lot of calls about having this politician, that politician on, and how he believed it was because they realized like his platform could be used as a weapon to sway people in one direction or others. And it's just like anything, like politicians will take advantage of big tech. Politicians will take advantage of whatever they can use as a tool to sway people in one direction or another. So without a doubt, I'm not surprised that he's not, he's looking over his shoulder. And how calm he sounds when he's having his show still is amazing, because I'm like, that type of eyes on you, like that amount of eyes on you, and you still can some way seem to have a casual conversation and almost like nobody's in the room is wild. So, you know, hats off to him, yourself, all the amazing work you do. Hopefully we talk again in the near future. Like I said, from the bottom of my heart, I really appreciate what you're doing. I think you truly are making a difference in regards to not just your kids' future, but my kids' future and the future of humanity.
Well, you've impressed me a great deal. If you want me back on, you got me.
Awesome. I really appreciate
All
it.
right.
Because I know you
Gotta
don't
run.
everybody. Yeah, take care.
All right. Take care.